Welcome to the Oh So Spurs podcast. I'm joined by a guest today who is a licensed coach and currently working at a professional level in coaching as well. It's great to have you on, and I'm looking forward to chatting to you today. How are you doing?
I'm good, Jim. Thanks for having me on.
Good. I thought it was a timely conversation because there's been a lot of discourse at the moment going around Tottenham Hotspur about how much of our struggles are tactical issues versus injuries versus fatigue. Maybe it's a mix of the three versus bad luck. And when these conversations start to get emotional, sometimes I think it's important to actually look under the hood and let's focus on as much factual data as we can to come to an answer to these questions and figure out where we are perhaps in our journey and maybe why the club should stick with Ange or maybe why they shouldn't. We don't know yet. Haven't been through this conversation yet. We'll hopefully get closer to that answer with you. But can I just put a disclaimer out that can we not go back to the Chelsea game from 18 months ago? I feel like that example is a little bit out of date now and it's still used a lot. When we had 9 men and went pushed up on the halfway line. And actually, in hindsight, I think you can argue all day if that was the right decision or not. We could have actually nicked a result there, but we lost. And let's stick with this season, I think, because things have changed. It's a different squad. It's a different phase of the project.
Yes.
And it's a different situation to last season. So we'll do that. But shall we start with the last couple of games? I think, JJ, that might be a sensible spot to start. There were images going around social media of, once again, and I'll get the image up actually, but there are pictures again of, I think it was Davies and Porro, that they were supposedly out of position. Now, you might tell me they're not out of position, but I'll get this up now and maybe you can tell me what you make of this image here that was doing the rounds. Is that for you how often have we seen basically the ball go into that space at the back post where the big gap is between Davies and I think is that Porro at right wing back there, and result in a goal scoring opportunity for the opposition? Is this a repeated pattern of tactical ineptitude, or is this what's causing this? Is this an issue to you as a coach when you see the screenshot?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, and you know, when you kind of look at this from a coaching perspective and what the staff are trying to do, there's key elements to Postecoglou's system, Ange Ball, and one of them is very famously, I think everyone can identify it, is the inverted fullback. So you can't see it any clearer than this image right here. So you can see how high and how central they are. And, there's loads of reasons why using two inverted fullbacks is a ploy that Ange wants to do, and again, I have to caveat everything I say with, this is my reading of it. I'm not part of the team, so I'm not privy to what they're trying to do on the training ground, but I'm looking at it from the outside and I'm looking at all of our games and I'm kind of analysing it from my perspective, right? And kind of getting the two, and again, inverting both the fullbacks is hugely risky. It speaks to the kind of the positivity of Ange's system, whereas loads of coaches, and I definitely don't think it started with Pep Guardiola. I think it's been done on many an occasion, maybe not as a consistent tactic, but loads of coaches have used fullbacks to come inside. And the idea being is that from an attacking point of view, you overload the midfield areas, right? So loads of coaches do it now because it's, very kind of current, and lots of coaches have done it in the past. To do it with two is extremely risky by its nature. But in theory, the risk reward is that bringing both up creates an even bigger overload in the midfield, or it allows you to push, because we've got three in the midfield, it allows you to push at least one of those, if not two, further up the pitch. Okay, so we're keeping our attackers really, really high, and you can see this in this image. We're keeping them really high to kind of keep the opposition backline high, keep them wide, so keep them spread, and then be able to push and really dominate the central area by having loads of players in there, being able to have short distances between the players for passing, create rotations, create passing lanes. And then on the flip side of it, what you would like, and what I would like, this is my seeing of it, what I would like on a defensive side is, because you've created those overloads, is you'd want to see it be structurally secure. Now,
Mhm.
pushing these two fullbacks into that area is obviously going to leave these giant spaces that you can see, right? And we know where they are. You're going to have your two centre halves, and you're going to have huge spaces where the fullbacks normally will be covering. And if it's kind of a cyclical argument, if Spurs have a fit squad, all the first team players, so arguably the players that are best suited to the system, and everybody's fit, then if we lose possession of the ball, Postecoglou uses a gegenpress, right? He uses the counter press. The second you lose the ball, everybody goes. Everybody tries to
Mhm.
regain possession as quickly as possible. So you cut down on the number of times that this is going to be an issue for you. But if oppositions do get out, the system is really, really dependent on the individual execution of players. And I feel that's one of the areas that we're getting let down this season. And again, that could be because you're not playing with arguably a lot of your first choice players. Then you layer on top of that the fatigue of the players, the decision making. And so in this situation, no, the long answer, the long way round to your question, they're not in the wrong position. So they're in positions to be able to affect the game. So Davies could make that, that underlapping run to support his wide man if it's on that side. The same thing with Porro. He can either play the ball through the channels or he can make a run inside or outside, and that can affect the opposition. And we have seen it work, right? We've seen it multiple times where those things from an attacking point of view have worked. So you can't argue that it doesn't work and it's complete madness. It does, but where are we at as a football team when it doesn't? So when we lose possession, if we haven't got the stamina, in our legs at the minute to do the counter press, should we still be doing that? And I think that's a very valid conversation.
So the conversation isn't because there's multiple parts of this conversation swirling around arguments over it's working or not. I think one is, can this system work in the Premier League? And the other question is it working right now in the Premier League? And I think they're two different things, because people have said it can't translate because it's physically impossible to keep up that intensity in the Premier League. There's better players. You need a deeper squad. Do you feel that it can translate into the Premier League if we did have a deeper squad? I guess that's my first question. Do you feel that is sustainable and possible to do if Tottenham said, let's just say we come out the season, things pick up again. We get to the transfer window and we get two more attackers to rotate with, a couple of midfielders and a wing back. We fill all those positions we say we need, and we've got a nice big beefy squad. Is it then sustainable, in your opinion?
Yeah. I mean, that's the $1 million question. I think what we would have to say is that Ange has used the system and he's taken the system everywhere he's been, and all things are relative. He has had success everywhere he's been. Whether or not it translates to the Premier League is the proof is in the pudding. So we will probably only know the answer to that question if we get the players to play the system, and then we have, an averagely healthy squad, because there's always going to be injuries. You're always going to have players out.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody does, right? So if those two things happen, if we can say, look, we're in a really good place with our playing staff, the individuals to suit the system, and I'd say from Postecoglou's perspective, he's probably only got one more transfer window before there really aren't any more excuses. Again, caveat that with the board that he's working with. This is Tottenham Hotspur Football Club. Do they buy the best players for the managers that come in every position? I think most of us would agree we don't do that. We don't necessarily buy the best player available on the market. We don't pay the wages. So with the restraints of the club that he works for, the players that are likely to come in, if he's got those players and he can keep them fit and healthy to a reasonable level, the only way we're going to find out that question if it works in the Premier League is by seeing it. And what I would do is I would say, if we roll it back to the beginning of the season, does it work? We've seen the system work, right? So we've seen it work, but only in patches. And then people have had that criticism where they've said, oh, but even when we had, all our starters or our first choice players, actually, we weren't that good. We were inconsistent, but we could be brilliant. So we could have been brilliant. And on our day, we were. but actually we were inconsistent, but the underlying numbers, the statistics were excellent. And so in a glass half full kind of world, I was looking at that thinking it's like a small tweak. It's a small little bit of improvement across the board that takes us from the underlying numbers being great to that translating to points and wins. Right? That was my hope.
Yes, and when I spoke to another coach recently, in Anton McElhone, he was saying that his simple answer to is similar to what you're kind of saying. I say, would this translate? Does this work? You've done the SPL, you've done the Premier League, you've done the Championship, you've done League One, you've done all these leagues. Do these tactics translate? In his opinion, this is his opinion. If you're listening to this and you don't think they can translate, that's absolutely fine. So the opinion of a professional coach who's worked across those divisions is yes, they can, but it's more about player quality needing to level up in line with the system. So if you put Ange's trouble-winning Celtic side in the Premier League, yes, they would likely get smashed about. Yep. But if you put level up in terms of quality, if you put because he had the best players in the SPL in that Celtic team, if you put the best players in the Premier League into a system in the Premier League, the success would likely translate and the system would likely work. But this brings me to the next bit, because we said part of this first question was, can the tactics work? And the next bit is, are they working? I think when you're 15th in the league, we have to put some responsibility on injuries towards bad luck, but you also have to put it on the system as well. You have to say those two things have collided to cause an extreme. And the bit one go this is, should we be doing things differently? The word adapt is often used at Ange a lot, that he should adapt more, because like you said, the energy levels, when you pushed everyone up forward through that image we showed earlier, and then this is what happens on the counter-attack, is you end up with a team scrambling back. Now, we have got players back, and this is where I'm interested as a coach's perspective. To me, that shows we should win that ball back. That's just before the killer ball's played for them to score the goal. We know it was a mistake from Kinski, really, that let it in. But is that player quality, fatigue, or tactics again here that result in this ball, getting to the foot of a player that's in loads of space at the back post again?
Yeah. So the first Villa goal is a great goal to look at if you really want to dive into it in detail. So in the way that I would wholly expect the coaching staff will go into this, if they haven't done the video review, which I doubt they have because they've had a couple of days off. When they go into the video review meeting, the first goal they could do an hour on, because there's so much in there, and it happens so early in the game as well, which is one of those odd things. It probably stems from, the instruction to the team is to go out and be very front foot early on, and maybe give 10 to 15 minutes of quite front foot until, naturally these players, with the amount of minutes that they've played, are going to have to drop off and do something different. Now, unfortunately, we find ourselves 1-0 down, and it's kind of wave after wave of attack from Aston Villa after that. If you roll this goal all the way back to where it comes from, you could roll it all the way back to Emi Martinez has got the ball. He plays it out to the left back. Now, from that moment, we go for an aggressive high press. And you could argue that early in the game, there's no reason to do it. But if the instruction from the manager is to do that from the off, front foot, really go for it, then that's what the players have been told. And the next part of it is execution. What follows is an absolute catalogue of failures by individuals all the way through, long before we get to this still that's on the screen right now. You've got Mikey Moore presses. For me, he runs the wrong line across to track his man. He sees Porro zooming up, and so he gives away responsibility for the left back, and he leaves it to Porro. And then the left back just skips inside two players, and all of a sudden, Porro and Mikey Moore are out of the game. Now, Mikey Moore, he doesn't cover himself in glory. He kind of tries to get back in, but doesn't get back in. Like, doesn't really, kind of hangs a hand over the player's shoulder, and you see it as as Jim, you're going through the stills. He kind of hangs a hand and he lets the player get through. At that moment, and this is because I've looked at this goal in good detail because I wanted to kind of understand how on earth it was possible. You'll see that Bentancur, people, tearing strips off Bentancur for the position he's taken up. He has to, in that moment, he has to go out to the right-hand side because Porro's gone flying up. So for me, Bentancur's gone to where he needed to go in that given situation. But then with Mikey Moore not doing his defensive bit well enough, Porro not being like he's late coming up and Dina, I think it steps inside him. Decky is then left in absolute no man's land. He's got a player running at him and he's also got very easy passes to get past him. The best he could do is probably foul the player and put him on the floor. And it's kind of the first minute and the mentality isn't risk. You can see here from this still, where Decky is. He's in absolute no man's land. He's got no chance here. So we've killed ourselves already. We've allowed Aston Villa a really easy out by not doing the very basic things, the very simple things. And as that continues to go on, for me, Berryval, inexperience, he runs to front screen, a pass into a striker where Danzo is in a good position. He's goal side, and he's got his player back to goal. So it's unlikely that they're going to spin that ball in behind. And even if they do, I think Danzo's quite quick, and I think Kinski's got the legs to get out. So for me, Berryval doesn't need to come over, push to the right to screen that pass. If he then stays, he's in the middle. I can't remember who it is. Is it number 8? Is it Tielemans or whoever that picks up the pass in the middle? For me, then Berryval should be further over. That should be his lane. He's then protecting, and then they don't get a really easy ball to get on the other side of the midfield. All right. And so all of these little moments and all of these little interactions, that most people probably aren't even thinking about, they all have an impact. And sometimes in football, with a high risk system like Postecoglou plays, if one gets it wrong, it sets off a chain reaction. And so the argument you can have is, should we adapt? Should we be more pragmatic? Should we be doing something different? Postecoglou's been quite clear. He won't. Right? He won't, because his belief is that if we crack it, on the other side of this is glory.
Is there, so because there's pros and cons to going more pragmatic, right? There's a short-term gain. I think anyone could argue with that. You de-risk a game, you de-risk a situation, and it's a points game. So you're likely going to get more odds of getting points out of a game like that by not putting younger, less experienced players into the situation where they're likely to make mistakes. Now, the flip side, which I think, Ange has said he prefers, is this is where the growth comes from. The mistakes is how they learn. I don't care about the points today. It's about the points, in the season where we're going to win stuff. Well, I think people want it to be now, but it's clearly not going to be now. And he even says, Ange, he wants it to be now. Like, he's not saying I'm putting this back a year. So do you... It's a tough one. Do you feel if Spurs then had a more experienced 6 who's not culpable to making a mistake and is better at reading the game, and a player instead of Berryval there that's, they've signed... I'm not saying Spurs need a bunch of world-class players, but the argument has been that when he was at Celtic and when he was working in the A-League, he made a concerted effort to sign a common trend in midfielders, and those types of midfielders were not necessarily the most elite in terms of ability, but they were workhorses, they were fighters, and they were disciplined, and they really listened to manager instructions. Whereas at Spurs, he seems to kind of got the opposite kind of mould. He's got quite talented, flary type midfielders who don't seem to particularly stick to what they're told often. They like to go a little bit off piste and get a bit excited by the round object on the pitch. Do you think it would change if he, with a couple of midfielders, do you think these mistakes suddenly disappear most games?
Yeah, possibly. It's so hard to say. That I think at the Premier League level, the thing that is true about how elite it is and how competitive it is that you are going to need players that can do both sides of it. I'm not sure you can go, the old trope of going with 11 James Milners or, insert player, Ben Davies for us, right? I don't think that you can execute that system just by having players who listen well and players who will, run their legs off every single game. I think you're going to have to ally that with the quality, because a lot of his system really does rely on individual execution. It's
Yeah.
huge, both from an attacking and a defensive point of view. So it does put a lot of responsibility, and you could also call that a lot of ownership. And I actually think that's one of the reasons the players do enjoy and back Postecoglou, is because he does give them ownership over the football and over what they do. And I think they do enjoy that. And so he's going to need players that can do both sides of it. And that's, that then comes down to the recruitment, smart recruitment of players in the bracket where Tottenham Hotspur are going to shop, because Tottenham Hotspur are not going for that, whatever you want to call it, A bracket. That's not, where we've shown that we do our business. So within that bracket below that, in terms of cost of transfer and cost of wages and the profile of the individual, and maybe a slightly younger type of player, the recruitment has got to be spot on for him. It's got to be really, really good for him for him to be successful at this level.
On top of that, there's been some other arguments that a lot of this has come down to fatigue, which fatigue leads to mistakes and fatigue leads to injuries. But the argument has been that could be avoided had we played more of the academy kids more often. So Elise, Atea, all these guys. I guess the question is, someone who's worked at and seen academies and worked with academies and the men's first team as well. Is that a fair ask, or is I guess what I'm looking for is a clearer answer on just how big is the gap from the academy to the first team, and is that and the second part of the question is, having worked with these kids and the men as well, is that if it goes wrong and if we chuck in Elise and he has a stinker, could that be detrimental, or could that be a great learning opportunity for that player? So I'm going to give a two-part question. First part, is it a massive gap between the two? And secondly, do teams like to avoid that situation, or is it seen as an opportunity for a kid to get minutes in the Premier League, as an example?
Yeah, I think they're two really good questions, and they shouldn't be underestimated. The difference between academy football and certainly any, let's call it first team football, but Premier League elite level, is enormous. Like you can't even compare the two. It doesn't matter how much game time the players are getting within the academy setup. You just cannot replicate in an academy system the level of quality, intensity, physicality, the tactical awareness, the technical ability, because you've got to remember that at that Premier League level, every single one of the 20 clubs has really, really elite players, including the bottom three, right? They have and they have a global scouting network, and you've got players coming from absolutely everywhere. Whereas within the academy system, even though you do have players coming in from overseas, it is not the same. It is absolutely nowhere near it. Okay. And you have to understand that what these young guys are being exposed to, a lot of it is very different to what you're going to need to go into the first team. So a lot of the work that we do as coaches is developing young players, and you're trying to develop lots of different aspects of their game. And so to a certain extent, it's a bit more experimental. So you're going to work with different systems, formations. You're going to ask players to play in different positions. You're going to be asking players to play up age groups, down age groups. You're going to do loads of different things with academy players that is nothing like saying, this week, you are going to go out there, Mikey, and you are going to be taking on, for example, Kyle Walker against Man City. Off you go. That is not the same as what he's being asked to do when he's playing for the under 21s, even at his young age. So it's almost a different game. It's almost a different ball game to say academy football to the first team. Now, is it an opportunity? 100%. It could be, because if a player comes in and does well, they're gaining vital experience, and then they can take that and they can carry that, and that will be shown. And it's very often shown when academy players are put into a steady and stable first team and had their minutes drip fed to them, or they go on a successful loan period. When they come back, all of a sudden you can see the difference in the academy setup. They've almost elevated. beyond what they were doing in the academy system, and you see it time and time again. And so it is an opportunity, and it is a way for these young lads to get vital experience and to grow their game, and it really is like a turbocharge for them. The flip side of it is what you were asking is, can it detrimentally affect players? Absolutely. Absolutely it can, because you can go somewhere or you can go up to the first team and it doesn't go your way, and every different young player is going to have a different mentality, a different psychology, a different way that they go through, the game and their life experiences. If it doesn't go well, it really can set a player back massively. You see this at the elite level. You see Sonny is bereft of confidence. He can't slot the ball in from 6 yards right now. Roll that back to a 16, 17, 18-year-old being thrown into a very unsteady situation at Tottenham Hotspur at the minute, and imagine what that could do if that went wrong. Imagine if Ajayi gives the ball away, people screaming for him to come on. He tries the same dribble that he scored in Europe. He has the ball nicked off him, one ball forward, and they score. What does that do to him? What's that going to be?
And he won't get unlike Son's going to start every week. He's going to get a chance of redemption, right? I guess for Ajayi, as an example, he has a stinker. As much as he has a great moment, but he might not get another chance to prove that was a one-off moment. So what I'm saying is it could destroy a player's reputation to the outside world if it was to go wrong over 10 minutes, and then we get Johnson back and he never gets into the team again, and you go, he's got no chance of redemption here. He's, that's going to have an impact as well, the long-term reputation, the immediate short-term reputation of a player, I guess. But on the flip side, we've seen some players, I guess an extreme, not from our academy, would be a Gareth Bale, who kept getting the chances, loss after loss of a loss, stuck through the adversity. Okay, this is an extreme example. We are using possibly, arguably, one of the top 5 players of all time, but he then had his explosive moment against Inter Milan and went from strength to strength. So I guess it is depending very much on who the player is and what they're like as a person as well, as to be considered.
100%. And what I would say, it's not necessarily about reputation, because the club will be really, really good. There's a really great setup, and people are speaking very highly about the academy setup. They will be around these players and they will be supporting them. It's not about that, but you're right about not getting the opportunity. So if one of the academy boys comes in, has a problematic game, and it really knocks them back, and just through the nature of other players coming back in, first teamers coming back in, they don't get more opportunities. It's more about it affecting their confidence, affecting them and how they perform and how they take situations, more so than externally people, the reputation of Ajayi. That's secondary. That's fans need to think about the way they talk on social media, but the club will protect these players.
So do you feel, I guess, in the conclusion to this part of the topic is, should we have pushed more of these players into more minutes? I think Son is the specific one. People say Son needs more rest, and I often challenge you back and I say, who for? And they go, oh gosh, there is no one. Let's move Spence to right. Well, what's the argument again? It's you could move more to left wing, I think's the argument, and then move Ajayi to right wing. Anyway, but anyway, would you say we could have done that to give Son more rotation? Would that be too risky with these academy kids and the step up? Because they come on for 20 minutes and they look really good. You think, oh, they're not out of their depth. But I've only seen them for 20 minutes. So I'm not a coach. Do you feel they could have been pushed in harder?
Some certainly could have. And again, some of this is the stuff that we don't get to see. We're not seeing the way that they're performing on the training ground. We're not seeing how they execute when they're doing the systems and the patterns and the tactics that the coaching staff are asking of them back when they were able to actually do the training. And then Mikey Moore is one of those that you look at him and not knowing him at all, he looks like he's got a kind of an inner confidence, and he's physically much more mature than his years. And so you'd think, yes, Mikey Moore is the kind of player that you could give more minutes to. But we have to look at the facts, is he was out for a couple of months with a virus. So in exactly a period that we could have drip fed him more minutes, he wasn't available. He wasn't there. He wasn't there for selection. And so we continued to run down Son's battery.
Yeah, and I think what people were saying is I did kind of say that back because my thoughts are the same. Well, he wasn't been available. And when he has been available, he has actually played. Archie Gray, when he's been available, he's played. Bergval's been available, he has played. They did rotate on in the early season, perhaps not as much as some people would say they could have, but they were being rotated in a bit. But I think their argument is, should you just chuck on an Elise and a Jahi and just run them out for 90 minutes and give two other players a rest? Would that work, do you think?
I mean, it could work, but I would say that's more luck than judgment, and I don't personally think that's a great way to go. I think that is literally, if you haven't got fit bodies, that's what you do. As in, you couldn't put out an 11, you would put those guys out. You've got to remember that the situation where you want to develop a young player and you want to get them minutes, you want to put them into a stable environment. And, you know, if people want to go back to the days of Pochettino, who did this really well and tried to bring players through the academy and he was sprinkling them into a team that was really set, really solid, knew what they were doing and were performing, and they were growing in their performances. So he was able to give those minutes out to your Bentalebs and your Masons and your other academy products, right?
Yes.
We are not in that situation. So for me, chucking in youngsters and just chuck them in, they'll be fine, I think it's extremely risky. It could certainly pay dividends, and they could go and be amazing and do a full Gareth Bale. All of them do a full Gareth Bale, but it could also go against you. They could pick up injuries, and they could have their confidence knocked by, you know, the results. If the results are different personnel, same results, because you're throwing in 16 and 17-year-olds trying to do something, this could affect them in a very negative way. So no, I don't think that's the best way to go about it.
Because Adam Cleary did a really good YouTube video, I don't know if you saw it recently, on 442, and I think it came out today, actually. I would advise anyone to check it out. I'll put it as the video that this one links to at the end, so you can flow straight into another great Ange Ball digestion, and if it's working and where is it struggling. But he highlights that team cohesion is very underrated, and team cohesion comes from having the same group of players that rotate with each other and know each other well. And Spurs haven't had that because of, not just because of injuries, but because of new signings and new injuries, and giving a lot of young players minutes. That's resulted in a lot of players trying to get to know each other, and as soon as they try and settle, someone comes back and takes their place, which is just as disruptive as someone else getting injured, because we're all waiting for these players to come back from injury. But that's going to create a whole level of reset again, where people are going, all right, how, you know, you might have someone new who's established in, like Danso, going, I've never played with Udogie before. I need to get to know this person. I don't know what their runs are. So we've still got some disruption to go. And what this resulted in is when we're pressed up the pitch and lost the ball, it's very easy to play against Spurs because everyone goes, there's no tactics. They don't know what they're doing. There's no shape, is the argument. But this article, and honestly, if you agree, it said that the reason for that is when players haven't played each other regularly, they don't know where they should be because they don't know where their teammates are naturally going to gravitate into. And that's not all coached overnight. That does come with time. Is that fair? Or is that a bit of a defensive stance against why we're not playing so well?
No, I wouldn't say. You can use it as a defensive stance, but it's absolutely fact. You know, that is just the way it is. The more players play together, the more they get to know each other's games, the more they execute their patterns, their systems with each other and knowing what everyone's going to do, the better it gets. And, you know, we can, again, roll it back because there's a lot of talk about Pochettino right now. Look at the stability in his teams. Look at the number of players, multiple seasons playing together. They knew exactly what they were getting from each other. And that is, you know, from the defensive element, that was the more mercurial players, what they're going to do in any given situation. And again, you can't necessarily know what a player like that's going to do, but you're expecting them to do something, and therefore you take your lead from that. If I'm a player watching Dembele receive the ball, I am 99% certain he holds that, right? He's not giving up possession. And therefore, if I'm a midfielder, if I'm a defender, if I'm one of the fullbacks trying to get up, I will make my decision off the back of that. Dembele's got the ball. I'm convinced he's holding it. This is what I'm going to do. Whereas someone coming into the team who I see them on the training ground, but it's completely different to doing it, against another Premier League team or a European team. I don't quite know. There's fractions of seconds of hesitation, or they do something and it's a bit different to what the guy who's normally there does. And that affects you, and that affects the team. It affects the structure, it affects the shape, and it affects what everybody's going to do. And so it is absolutely a valid point. That's why you have first 11s, right? People talk about what's the strongest 11. The teams that are playing very well, the same players often play every game, and that chemistry is part of the reason why that is.
Interesting. Okay, so it's fair to say then that it's, although part of it is self-induced from the high intensity system that leads to more injuries and disruption, the fact that we've had to overhaul so many players in quick succession of that 25-man squad is going to add to that disruption, as is bringing in young players who are going to take time to get to know the Premier League, let alone their positioning. So this brings us to another kind of final part, which has come up regularly about Postecoglou, and many use it as a criticism, some use it as an observation. There's the argument that he doesn't do enough training. Now, I've spoken to one person who gave an opinion on this, who worked at Spurs for 10 years, and they said, Redknapp, ABB, and Poch, who they worked for, they all did 1 to 2 days on the training pitch, but the rest, they would assign coaches and they would be in the office talking about other things, signings, scouting other teams, whatever it is, talking to Daniel Levy about and Langer about whatever it is.
Yep.
You've worked in those environments, right? When you've got this cycle of games every 3 to 4 days, what does the kind of schedule look like? Because that's going to contribute to this lack of shape as well, surely, and the tactical challenges. Is there time for someone like Postecoglou to get these players on the pitch and go through it? Is it all video analysis? What does that kind of week look like for Spurs?
Yeah, I mean, and again, with no inside knowledge of the way that Tottenham are doing things at the moment, it's with games Thursday, Sunday, with that little time, a lot of the time is just taken up with rest and recovery, right? So there was a lot of talk about the intensive training sessions are the reason why, players keep getting re-injured. I think it's very unlikely that any intense sessions, or very, very few intense sessions, have happened in the last couple of months. There just has not been the window to do that. If you've got a week to do that, you're going to come in after the game, or you'll have a day off and then you'll come in the following day. There's going to be rest, recovery, and then everything is periodized, right? And people know what that means in terms of like you're gonna ramp up the intensity throughout the week in terms of getting you game ready by the end of the week. You have to do a very different version of that when you've got midweek games. And so again, you are very likely to do your tactical work for the upcoming game and anything specific in the days before the game. So either the day directly before the game or the couple of days before, depending on how long you've got. And so for me, what I would expect the coaches to be doing at Tottenham is there's a load of video analysis going on. That's part of your day. That's part of what you're going in and doing. You'll be looking back at the last game and then you'll be looking forward to the next game. There might be broader tactical sessions going on in the same way, in terms of if you've got a run of games where you are going to deploy very similar tactical systems, you're going to like zoom out a little bit and you're going to really go into those, and you're going to highlight individuals and you're going to highlight bits of different games recently, and you're going to say, look, this, we didn't do it well enough, and I can show you it again and again and again, and we're going to improve that. This we did really well, so we want to really double down on this. We want our players in these positions doing these things. So that'll be the video analysis sessions, and they'll be doing those during the training days. Then they're out on the grass. There's lighter sessions the closer you are to a game that's just gone. Getting heavier load. I don't think they've done any intensive sessions recently without players available. And then you will be doing the tactical work. And they've had so little time that the tactical sessions, if they are like a day or 2 days before the game, will be walkthroughs, or they will be very light sessions. This is what I believe will be happening at the moment. They will not be running them at 100% to try and run these drills. They will be walking through these sessions. These are the patterns. This is what we're looking for against this particular opposition. This is how they set up. This is what they play. And so this is what we're going to do to have success, right? And that's what they'll be doing on the grass. My understanding of the way Postecoglou works is that he does not do the individual sessions that lead up to the final tactical session. So he lets his coaching staff come up with a series of drills, as people understand them, sessions, a series of drills that will work in a way that they are training the elements they want to then put into practice in the larger setup. Okay,
Is that normal? Is that like standard? Is that like
completely?
Yeah, okay. Because I think that's
Completely normal.
what people have a perception of is, let's just say Pep Guardiola is on the training pitch 7 days a week drilling tactics into the players, whereas the manager of our club doesn't do that. They pop in once a week. But it seems to be that the perception of what managers do every week is different to reality.
Yeah. I mean, Postecoglou, I've got a feeling that Postecoglou stands on the side of every training session, barring, some that he's got another engagement that he needs to do while the players are doing something. But yeah, I've got a feeling he's a real control freak from that perspective, and I've got a feeling he's standing there all the time. So his coaching team will work out the sessions and the way they're going to run. They probably have their team meetings as a group of coaches with Postecoglou. They're probably, the more he trusts them, the less they'll do this. But they're probably putting it in front of him, saying, this is what we want to do. He might help and guide and tweak. And then they go and deliver. And again, it's about those coaches going out and delivering those sessions that are going to get the players ready for that final session, the tactical setup. And my feeling is that's when Postecoglou is really going to step in. He's going to have much more kind of input into the session, effectively him running the session, right? And very often that might be 11v11. And I don't mean a full match, but standing out there and running through the full pattern or a slightly smaller version of that. So 11v11 on a slightly smaller pitch. Those kind of things, that's my feeling of where Postecoglou will be coming in.
Well, thank you, JJ. This has been really insightful for me. I've certainly learnt a lot, and if you're around, we must do some more tactical deep dives on specific games in future. That would be great with your support on that, because I, like most of the YouTubers, would be just screenshotting things and giving my opinion from someone who hasn't worked in the field. And yeah, it's great to have the eyes from someone who actually knows and has worked in the field. So yeah, thank you. If you guys like the content as well, we've got some more videos coming up. One is a deep dive with an auditor and a team of finance specialists on ENIC's ownership of Tottenham and how that's evolved pre and post their takeover. We're not looking to convert you to either side. We're just going to lay down some facts and go through your questions. And we've also got some awesome other interviews coming up as well. So yeah, if you want to be a member, you can click below the YouTube video and sign up. It really helps us out. Yeah, thanks, JJ. Appreciate it a lot, mate. Up the Spurs.
Amazing.